My name is Joel. I'm the lead pastor of Encounter, and we're really glad that you're joining us today for our online service. John F. Kennedy used to say that a moment of crisis presented both danger and opportunity. And he was obviously talking about it in the context of his time. So there was the dangers of the Cold War, and there was all the opportunities of the technological and scientific advancements of the atomic age, and the bright future possibilities that were around that. But I think that those words that he said then apply to us today. We're at a moment of crisis, really, right? Like, we're at a moment that there is a very real health danger, that there's people that are losing their lives. There are people that, their health is being affected, some of the most vulnerable people. And that's, spilling out in all sorts of ways. So there's people that have been affected by this economically, people that are not being able to, work right now, whose income has been affected. And then there's, other people that, like most of America right now, we're staying at home right now, and that's, maybe some of us are fortunate enough that we're able to continue working, and this is a way in which we can support the efforts of the nation and the world, really trying to fight this virus. But that also takes a toll, right? Like, it's a moment of crisis, and it throws off a lot of, like, our life rhythms. It throws off the rhythms that we had with our families, with our friends. Maybe it's throwing off some of the rhythms that you had in your spiritual life, and how you sought God and how you prayed. I feel like I've worked more in the last couple of weeks than before, just because of scrambling to figure out how to transition everything in church to be online. So there's definitely a crisis. And I think that in a crisis, there is both danger and opportunity. There's a legit danger that, not only the people that are suffering, the real physical danger to their health because of the virus, but even to us that are, right now healthy and we're staying at home. There's a danger that this change in our schedule, the change in our rhythms and our patterns can take. I was reading a report from Sky News that one of the leading lawyers in China thought that there was going to be a spike in divorce in there because of, there's couples that are living one another 24/7, and they're just, getting into more fights, and there's no break from that, and the resentment and the bitterness just grows, and once this is over, they just don't want to see each other again. And it's obviously like an extreme case, and I'm hoping it doesn't come to that there. But there are dangers, right? Like, you talk to friends and say, hey, I think I'm going to gain 15, 20 pounds because I've eaten like every single piece of junk food I can find in this apartment. There's just people that we're kind of like just numbing our minds on all the time off that we have. And, we're watching every show we can think of in Netflix, and we are just spending our time like just scrolling through Twitter and social media, just trying to consume the news. And there's a toll that takes, doesn't it? It affects our mood. It affects our emotion. Maybe there's people that you're struggling with, maybe like anxiety or even depression. And this time doesn't help that, right? Being isolated, being close doesn't help that. Maybe it's affecting your relationships with other people. You miss your friends, and you wish you could be closer to them. Like, this crisis has these very real dangers in our lives. And I think one of the biggest dangers is the danger that's going to happen to our spiritual life. That we've been working with some of the guys at our church, trying to develop a rule of life. And basically, it's these practices in which we can organize our lives to seek God better. And it's like, commitment to spending time in prayer every day, spending time reading the scriptures every day, spending some time, worshiping God in all different sorts of ways. And we're like, starting to work on that, really excited about that. And then this happened, and it kind of like, we're talking how it threw off all of that effort and all those rhythms that we had been developing, and it feels like we have to start from scratch because now this feels almost like the new normal a little bit. But I also think that maybe there's an opportunity here. There's this passage in the book of Romans where the Apostle Paul was writing to this church, and he says that in all things, says, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Now, Paul is not saying that God makes suffering happen or creates suffering. He's actually saying the opposite of that. He's saying because God's so committed to the good of people, because God loves people so much, even when we go through moments of pain and suffering, through moments of crisis like the ones we're going through right now, something good can come out of that. God can redeem that time. And I think that that's the opportunity that we have all presented today. That we can take the opportunity that this crisis presents us and redeem that and grow closer in our relationship with God and go closer with our community even though we're apart, and grow closer with our family even though it might sometimes feel stressful because we're around each other 24/7. What if we were to lean into these things and not pull back? Because one of the things that crisis does is that just throws this wrecking ball into our rhythms and into the things that we're trying to do. And our temptation is to kind of just pull back because we don't know how to grab our bearings. And life is just happening to us. And we can do that for a short period of time. But any longer than that, it completely will disrupt whatever type of progress we were trying to make into our lives. So what we're doing is I want to make a pause on the series on forgiveness that we've been talking about, and just talk about for a couple of weeks on how do we lean into the things that are going to take us through this time. So when we look back at it, we're saying, you know what, that was an incredibly traumatic, crazy thing that happened, but we got through this. And it's only that we got through this, we're better on the other side. I feel closer in my relationship with God. I feel closer to my spouse. I feel closer to my friends. I feel like in my mission as a Christian, I've moved forward in my life. So today I want to take a couple minutes to talk about this idea of leaning into God. And this is basically what I want to say. I know that schedules are crazy right now. I've seen a lot of the memes about how people are like, binge watching all these shows. I've worked harder the last couple of weeks than I've worked in a long time because we were scrambling, trying to figure out what it looks like to kind of like move church online and trying to like set up the technology and what can we do, what can we not do, all sorts of things. It's been a really difficult couple of weeks. My guess is that for a lot of you, it's been like that, hasn't it? Maybe you have a child and you weren't used to like being with your child at the time and working at the same time, and now you have to figure that out. It hasn't been an easy time. There feels like there's no margin whatsoever. But as the days go by and we're kind of like start to like grab our bearings and get used to it, there is also the reality that a lot of the things that we used to do, we can't do anymore. And we have all this time and we have to figure out how to use the time that we have now. How do we feel it? There's people that are basically, working all the time, and that's the way they're taking advantage of this time and just like become more productive and just work all the time, or kind of like slipping into some sort of like, numbness and just consuming more social media. But what if we looked at our lives right now and we finally took the advantage of creating the rhythms that will help us draw closer to God? What if, I'll give you an example. You don't have a commute right now. And maybe for some of you, like what you're doing is, hey, I don't have this commute. I can sleep in and just wake up, a little bit later and just start working right away. What if you sleep in a little bit more? Maybe like instead of sleeping in 45 minutes, sleep in 10, 15 minutes. Now you have a little bit of extra time. Why don't you use this time to pray, to seek God? Well, instead of binge watching like 5 episodes of a show, binge watch 2, and take some extra time to maybe, just talk to your friends. Maybe do a hangout call. Maybe read the scriptures. Maybe start reading, some book that will help you grow spiritually. We have this incredible opportunity that there's this margin that's kind of like forced upon our lives. One of the biggest enemies of intimacy with God is distraction. And it's not that we don't care about God, it's not that we don't want to be close to God, it's just that we have so much stuff to do. And there's always a new event, and there's always a new appointment, and there's always a date or a party or some sort of engagement, or somebody's visiting from out of town, or there's a sports game going on. Like there's all these things going on that are all like taking advantage of our time and asking for attention. And right now, none of those things are there. For the next few days, maybe a few weeks, you're not expected anywhere. And you know what? the one being that's there for you right now is God. And God's always expecting you. God's always expecting us. What if we use this time to not pull away from our relationship with God, but to actually look at our lives and find the margin and the rhythms, then we can lean into a relationship with God. And guys, that's a struggle for me. These last few days have been really weird, really difficult. It's been really hard trying to figure out when I pray, when I read the scriptures, when I'm working on my sermons and trying to, feel like I'm grasping at straws. But guess what? We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna start like building rhythms in this, new reality that we're all living in. What if we make God a priority right now? During moments of crisis, God can become more real to us. I've been reading through Psalm 23, and Psalm 23 is really interesting. I was writing a paper for school, and I noticed something in the paper that I hadn't noticed before, and it's there's a change in the Psalm. So if you start reading the Psalm, it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. The psalmist is talking about God on the third person. He's like talking, the Lord is my shepherd. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. But then something interesting happens. When you get to verse 4, there's a change. And he says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Do you know what happens there? There was this change from God being a he in the third person to God being a you in the second person. There's a sense of nearness of God in the midst of crisis and difficulty. It's almost like the psalmist, the first few verses, he's been looking around and he's saying, talking about God to other people almost. The Lord, he's my shepherd, and he makes me lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside quiet waters. When things are good, he can talk about God to other people in that way. But when the moment of crisis happens, and when he's in the darkest valley, in the valley of the shadow of death, all of a sudden he's looking to God. And he's saying, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. God has become this much more intimate, closer reality to him. That's what moments of crisis can do. They kind of push us towards God. And we have a choice to make. We can, pull against that and kind of try to walk away from that and just numb ourselves or distract ourselves or occupy our hearts and our minds with anything else. Or we can lean into God and we can draw closer to him and we can feel God much more real in our lives when we're in this moment of crisis. And what happens is that, if we walk out of that, when we get through that, God's still there. What if this time is a time that catalyzes your spiritual transformation? What if walking out this time, you're like, you know what? I was kind of seeking God, but not really knowing if he was real. And there's something that happened during that time that really started seeking God and praying and reading the scriptures and just leaning into that. And all of a sudden, God just became this reality in my life. Guys, that's my hope for me, and that's my hope for you. Maybe you're watching this and you're not a Christian and you're kind of just checking this thing out. And my invitation is you can lean into God too right now. You can also, open up your life to the story of Jesus and draw closer to God, because guess what? God's already there. In this moment of crisis, God wants to be there for everybody. And it's our choice to lean into that and let God be the God who walks with us in the valley of the shadow of death. So may you draw closer to God during this time. May you be able to lean into God. Grace and peace.